The Horse Guards Parade in London was more than just a daily event. It was a living piece of history, a tradition that stretched back centuries. Every morning, rain or shine, the streets around Whitehall came alive with anticipation as tourists from all corners of the globe gathered to witness something truly special: the changing of the guard. This ceremony wasn't just about soldiers marching in perfect synchronization or horses prancing with regal elegance. It was a celebration of discipline, heritage, and national pride. For Captain James Whittaker, being part of this grand tradition was both an honor and a responsibility. A veteran member of the King's Guard, he had spent years honing his skills, not only as a soldier but also as a horseman. His partner in this prestigious duty was Reginald, a magnificent chestnut stallion known for his strength, intelligence, and calm demeanor under pressure. Together, they'd made an impressive pair, embodying everything the King's Guard stood for: precision, dignity, and unwavering focus. As Captain Whittaker prepared Reginald for the day's parade, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at how timeless the ceremony felt. The crisp red tunics, gleaming helmets adorned with plumes, and the rhythmic clatter of hooves against cobblestones transported everyone present to another era, an age when knights and monarchs ruled the land. Yet here they were in modern-day London, surrounded by skyscrapers, smartphones, and bustling city life. Somehow, the contrast only added to the magic of the moment. Tourists jostled for the best viewing spots along the barriers, their excitement palpable. Families pointed excitedly at the towering horses, while children pressed their faces against the railings, wide-eyed with wonder. Cameras clicked incessantly, capturing every detail of the scene. Some visitors whispered questions to each other, curious about the significance of the uniforms or the names of the different regiments on display. Others simply stood in silence, soaking in the atmosphere and marveling at the sheer spectacle unfolding before them. Despite the festive mood, Captain Whittaker knew better than to let his guard down, literally or figuratively. While most spectators respected the rules, there were always a few who pushed boundaries, either out of ignorance or sheer enthusiasm. He'd seen it all over the years. People leaning too far over the barriers, waving objects near the horses' heads, or even attempting to touch the animals. Such behavior could easily spook the horses, putting both the riders and the crowd at risk. It was a delicate balance, maintaining the dignity of the ceremony while ensuring everyone's safety. Today, however, seemed promising. The weather was pleasant, and the crowd appeared particularly eager to enjoy the show. As Captain Whittaker adjusted Reginald's bridle one last time, he allowed himself a small smile. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he trusted in his training and in the unspoken bond he shared with his loyal steed. With a final pat on Reginald's neck, he mounted gracefully, ready to take his place in the procession. Little did he know, this day would bring an unexpected test of his skill and composure, a moment that would leave a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed it. The crowd gathered around the Horse Guards Parade was a vibrant mix of people from all walks of life. Families with young children, couples holding hands, solo travelers with backpacks, and groups of friends armed with cameras, all had come to witness the iconic ceremony that was as much a symbol of London as Big Ben or Buckingham Palace. The air buzzed with excitement, punctuated by laughter, chatter, and the occasional squeal of delight from a child who caught sight of one of the towering horses. Among the spectators stood a group of teenagers from Australia, their accents unmistakable as they debated which horse looked the strongest. Nearby, an elderly couple from Canada leaned against the barrier, reminiscing about the first time they'd seen the changing of the guard decades ago on their honeymoon. A young woman from Japan adjusted her camera lens meticulously, determined to capture the perfect shot for her travel blog. Each person brought their own story, their own reason for being there, but they were united by a shared sense of wonder at the spectacle before them. Captain James Whittaker surveyed the scene from atop Reginald, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd for any signs of trouble. Most visitors were respectful, standing behind the barriers and following the instructions of the stewards who patrolled the area. But as always, There were exceptions. A few tourists seemed oblivious to the rules, inching closer to the procession in their eagerness to get a better view. One man even crouched down directly in front of the horses, attempting to snap a photo from ground level. His actions drew nervous glances from those around him, and a nearby steward quickly intervened, ushering him back to safety. Despite these minor disruptions, Captain Whittaker remained focused. He knew that part of his role was not just to perform, but to project calm and authority, setting an example for both his fellow guardsmen and the audience. His posture was impeccable, his movements deliberate, and his expression neutral yet commanding. Even Reginald seemed to mirror his rider's composure, walking with steady, measured steps despite the commotion surrounding them. What struck Captain Whittaker most about the crowd that day was its diversity and its unpredictability. For every visitor who admired the ceremony with quiet reverence, there was another who couldn't resist testing the limits. Some leaned precariously over the barriers, trying to touch the horses' manes or feed them snacks. Others waved brightly colored objects in the air, hoping to catch the attention of the riders. A toddler broke free from her mother's grip and toddled dangerously close to the procession before being scooped up just in time. These moments kept Captain Whittaker alert, his senses finely tuned to every movement around him. Yet he also found himself marveling at the sheer enthusiasm of the crowd. There was something heartwarming about seeing people from so many different cultures come together to celebrate a tradition that transcended borders. It reminded him why he had chosen this path, to be part of something greater than himself, something that connected the past with the present. As the parade continued, the energy of the crowd shifted. At first, there was a collective hush as the guardsmen marched into position, their synchronized steps echoing off the surrounding buildings. Then came gasps of admiration as the horses performed their intricate maneuvers, their glossy coats catching the sunlight. Cheers erupted when the band struck up a familiar tune, and applause rippled through the audience like waves. Captain Whittaker could feel the admiration radiating from the spectators, and it fueled his determination to give them a performance they wouldn't forget. But amidst the cheers and smiles, there were subtle reminders of the challenges that lay ahead. A small cluster of tourists near the front row began jostling for space, their elbows brushing against the barrier. One young man, clearly eager to impress his friends, stepped forward with his phone raised high, attempting to take a selfie with the horses in the background. His boldness drew murmurs of disapproval from those around him, but he didn't seem to notice or care. Captain Whittaker's jaw tightened ever so slightly as he guided Reginald closer to the edge of the procession, ready to react if needed. For now, the situation remained under control, but the tension simmered beneath the surface. The crowd's excitement was infectious, but it was also unpredictable, a reminder that even the most carefully planned ceremonies could be disrupted by human curiosity and impulsiveness. As Captain Whittaker rode on, he reminded himself to stay vigilant. The next few minutes would require not only skill, but also patience and quick thinking. As the procession moved along its route, the atmosphere remained lively but increasingly unpredictable. The crowd's enthusiasm showed no signs of waning, and while most spectators continued to admire the ceremony from a safe distance, a small group near the front began to grow restless. Their excitement seemed to override their awareness of the rules, or perhaps they simply didn't realize how close they were coming to the horses. Captain James Whittaker watched them carefully, his sharp eyes noting every movement as he guided Reginald with practiced precision. The trouble began when one young man, emboldened by the energy of the crowd, decided that watching from behind the barrier wasn't enough. Ignoring the warnings of nearby stewards, he stepped forward abruptly, holding his phone out in an attempt to take a selfie with Reginald in the background. His sudden appearance startled the majestic horse, whose ears flicked back instinctively. For a moment, time seemed to freeze as Reginald shifted his weight, his powerful muscles tensing beneath his gleaming coat. Then, with a snort, the stallion reared up slightly, lifting his front hooves off the ground. Gasps rippled through the crowd as people scrambled backward, some clutching their children or belongings tightly. The young man who had caused the disturbance froze, his foam still raised midair, his face pale with shock. Others around him exchanged panicked glances, unsure of what would happen next. A child nearby began to cry, her sobs adding to the rising tension. It was a chaotic scene, one that could easily spiral out of control if not handled swiftly and decisively. Captain Whittaker, however, didn't panic. Years of training kicked in as he leaned forward slightly in the saddle, his body language calm yet commanding. With gentle pressure on the reins and a soft murmur, he reassured Reginald, guiding him back into a steady stance. The horse responded immediately, lowering his front legs and settling back onto all fours. Though the incident had lasted only seconds, it felt like an eternity to those who witnessed it. The crowd held its breath, waiting to see how the situation would unfold. Nearby guardsmen sprang into action, their movements efficient and coordinated. Two stewards rushed toward the young man, firmly but politely escorting him back behind the barrier. Another guard positioned himself between the crowd and the horses, creating a buffer zone to prevent further disruptions. Meanwhile, Captain Whittaker maintained his composure, projecting an aura of calm authority that helped steady not only Reginald, but also the nervous spectators. His focus never wavered. His gaze remained fixed ahead, as though nothing unusual had occurred. Despite the quick resolution, the ripple effects of the incident lingered. Some members of the crowd exchanged uneasy looks, whispering about what had just happened. Others stared at Reginald with a mixture of awe and concern, realizing for the first time just how large and powerful the horses truly were. A few tourists glanced guiltily at their phones, perhaps reconsidering their earlier attempts to get closer to the animals. Even the young man who had sparked the disruption looked shaken, his bravado replaced by visible remorse. For Captain Whittaker, this moment underscored the delicate balance required to manage such a high-profile event. On one hand, the changing of the guard was a celebration, a chance for people to connect with history and tradition. On the other hand, it was a serious operation that demanded respect and discipline from everyone involved. Horses like Reginald were trained to perform under pressure, but they were still living creatures capable of reacting to unexpected stimuli. One wrong move could jeopardize not only the safety of the riders and horses, but also the well-being of the crowd. As the procession resumed its path, Captain Whittaker couldn't help but reflect on the fragility of the moment. The line between admiration and interference was thin, and today's incident served as a stark reminder of that fact. Yet, even in the midst of chaos, there was beauty in the way the King's Guard adapted and persevered. The ceremony wasn't just about following a script. It was about responding to challenges with grace and professionalism, ensuring that the spirit of the tradition endured no matter what. The crowd gradually settled back into its rhythm, though the mood had shifted slightly. There was still excitement in the air, but now it was tempered by a newfound awareness of the responsibility that came with being part of such a historic event. As Captain Whittaker rode on, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about performing a duty. It was about fostering understanding and respect, one interaction at a time. And as he guided Reginald through the next series of maneuvers, he knew that the day's challenges were far from over, but neither was his resolve to rise above them. Captain James Whittaker's calm demeanor in the face of chaos was nothing short of remarkable. While the crowd around him buzzed with nervous energy after Reginald's brief reaction, Whittaker exuded an unshakable sense of control. His hands remained steady on the reins, his posture upright and composed, as though he were conducting a symphony rather than managing a startled horse in front of hundreds of spectators. It wasn't just skill, it was years of discipline and training that allowed him to maintain such poise under pressure. Reginald, too, seemed to draw strength from his rider's confidence. The stallion's ears twitched slightly as he processed the commotion around him, but Whittaker's gentle commands kept him grounded. A soft click of the tongue here, a subtle shift of the reins there. These small gestures spoke volumes to the horse, reassuring him that everything was under control. Within moments, Reginald had settled back into his usual rhythmic gait, his powerful strides once again smooth and deliberate. To the untrained eye, it might have looked effortless, but those who understood horsemanship could see the intricate bond between man and beast at work. The audience, still reeling from the unexpected disruption, began to notice something extraordinary. Captain Whittaker hadn't raised his voice or shown any sign of frustration. Instead, he carried himself with quiet authority, projecting an aura of calm that seemed to ripple outward. Even the young man who had caused the disturbance appeared visibly humbled, watching Whittaker with wide eyes, as if seeing the guard for the first time. The murmurs among the crowd shifted from concern to admiration, with some spectators nodding appreciatively at the soldier's professionalism. But Whittaker didn't stop there. Recognizing the teachable moment before him, he took a brief pause, not to scold or lecture, but to communicate through action. He guided Reginald into a slow circle near the edge of the procession, allowing the crowd to observe the horse up close. With each step, Whittaker demonstrated how trust and communication formed the foundation of their partnership. When Reginald responded instantly to a slight tug on the reins or a soft word from his rider, the audience couldn't help but marvel at the harmony between them. Gasps of amazement turned into spontaneous applause, a testament to the respect Whittaker had earned in just a few minutes. Even more impressive was the way Whittaker used body language to convey his message. Without uttering a single word, he made it clear that these horses were not props or photo opportunities. They were living, breathing animals deserving of care and respect. His gaze swept over the crowd, meeting the eyes of those nearest the barrier. For a fleeting moment, it felt as though he were speaking directly to each person, reminding them of the importance of following the rules. Some visitors exchanged sheepish glances, perhaps recalling their own earlier attempts to get too close. Others nodded solemnly, silently vowing to be more mindful moving forward. The stewards, too, seemed to take their cue from Whittaker's example. They moved with renewed purpose, ensuring that everyone stayed behind the barriers while maintaining a polite but firm presence. The atmosphere shifted noticeably. The earlier restlessness gave way to a quieter, more reverent tone. Parents whispered explanations to their children about why it was important to keep a safe distance, while friends nudged each other to put away their phones and simply enjoy the moment. For Captain Whittaker, this was more than just damage control. It was an opportunity to reinforce the values that defined the King's Guard. Discipline, respect, and adaptability weren't just words. They were principles woven into every aspect of the ceremony. By handling the situation with grace and composure, he transformed what could have been a negative experience into something meaningful. The crowd wasn't just witnessing a performance anymore. They were learning a lesson about responsibility and mutual respect. As the procession resumed its course, the tension dissolved completely. Spectators cheered louder than before, their applause tinged with gratitude. Many clapped not just for the spectacle, but for the reminder that traditions like this required effort and cooperation from everyone involved. Captain Whittaker acknowledged their appreciation with a subtle nod, his expression unchanged, but his pride evident in the way he sat taller in the saddle. In that moment, it became clear that true leadership wasn't about commanding attention, it was about earning it. And Captain Whittaker had done exactly that, turning a potentially dangerous situation into a display of skill, patience, and dignity. As he rode on, the crowd's admiration followed him like a wave, carrying with it a renewed sense of awe for the men and women who upheld centuries of tradition with unwavering dedication. The brief pause in the ceremony had transformed the mood of the crowd. What had started as a moment of chaos and uncertainty now felt like an opportunity for connection, a chance for the audience to truly understand the significance of what they were witnessing. Captain James Whittaker, still seated atop Reginald, took advantage of this shift in energy. Without saying a word, he began to demonstrate the depth of his bond with the horse, turning the disruption into a lesson that would resonate long after the parade ended. With precise movements, Whittaker guided Reginald through a series of intricate maneuvers. He started with something simple, a gentle trot along the edge of the procession, allowing the spectators to admire the horse's graceful gait. Then, with subtle cues, he directed Reginald into a perfect circle, the stallion's hooves striking the ground in rhythmic harmony. The crowd watched in awe as man and horse moved as one, their synchronization so flawless it almost seemed choreographed. But this wasn't just performance, it was communication, a silent dialogue between rider and animal that spoke volumes about trust and training. As Reginald executed each movement with effortless precision, Whittaker subtly emphasized the importance of respect. When the horse responded instantly to a soft command or a light touch on the reins, it was clear how much care and attention went into building such a partnership. The message was unmistakable. These horses weren't mere participants in a show. They were highly trained companions who relied on mutual understanding and respect. For many in the audience, this realization hit home. Some visitors lowered their phones, choosing instead to simply watch and appreciate the display without distractions. Others exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the lesson being conveyed. Whittaker didn't stop there. Knowing that actions often spoke louder than words, he decided to engage the crowd further. As Reginald stood calmly near the barrier, Whittaker leaned forward slightly in the saddle, making deliberate eye contact with those closest to him. His gaze wasn't harsh or judgmental. Rather, it carried a quiet authority that demanded attention. Slowly, he raised a hand, not to point or scold, but to gesture toward the horse beside him. It was a universal signal, inviting the crowd to reflect on what they had just seen. Many understood immediately, nodding in acknowledgement or offering small smiles of gratitude. Parents used the moment to teach their children valuable lessons. "See how calm the horse is," one mother whispered to her wide-eyed son. "That's because everyone around him is being careful and respectful. We need to do the same." Nearby, a teenager who had earlier been snapping selfies lowered her phone and stepped back from the barrier, her expression thoughtful. Even the young man responsible for the earlier disruption looked visibly moved, standing quietly with his arms crossed as if processing the weight of what had happened. The stewards, too, played their part in reinforcing the message. They circulated among the crowd, politely reminding people to stay behind the barriers while pointing out moments of beauty in the ceremony. One steward even shared a story with a group of tourists about how long it took to train a horse like Reginald, emphasizing the dedication required to maintain such traditions. These small interactions added layers of meaning to the event, transforming it from a passive viewing experience into an active learning opportunity. By the time Whittaker guided Reginald back into formation, the atmosphere had changed entirely. The earlier tension had dissolved, replaced by a sense of collective appreciation. Applause broke out spontaneously, not the scattered clapping of before, but a unified wave of admiration that rippled through the crowd. People cheered not only for the spectacle, but for the deeper understanding they had gained. Some even called out heartfelt thanks, their voices carrying over the hum of conversation. For Captain Whittaker, this moment reinforced why he loved his role in the King's Guard. It wasn't just about performing ceremonies or upholding traditions. It was about fostering connections. Every day brought new challenges, but it also offered opportunities to inspire others, to remind them of the values that underpin these age-old rituals. As he rode on, surrounded by cheers and applause, Whittaker felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He hadn't just managed a difficult situation. He had turned it into a celebration of respect, discipline, and shared humanity. And as the procession continued, the crowd remained engaged, their earlier enthusiasm tempered by a newfound appreciation for the skill and dedication required to make moments like this possible. For many, it was a reminder that traditions weren't static relics of the past. They were living, breathing experiences that evolved with every interaction. As the ceremony continued, Captain James Whittaker turned what could have been a forgettable disruption into an unforgettable display of skill and grace. With Reginald now calm and responsive, he decided to showcase the full extent of their partnership, transforming the remainder of the procession into a masterclass in horsemanship. The crowd, still buzzing from the earlier incident, leaned forward in anticipation, their eyes glued to the pair as they moved with effortless coordination. Whittaker guided Reginald through a series of advanced maneuvers, each one more impressive than the last. First came a precise halt, where the horse stopped so suddenly and smoothly that it seemed as though time itself had frozen. Then, with a gentle nudge of his heels, Whittaker signaled for a pivot turn, a move that required perfect balance and trust. Reginald spun on his hind legs like a dancer, his glossy coat catching the sunlight as he completed the rotation without missing a beat. The audience erupted into applause, their cheers echoing off the historic buildings surrounding Horse Guards Parade. But Whittaker wasn't done yet. Sensing the crowd's growing admiration, he pushed further, demonstrating the kind of control that only years of training could achieve. He directed Reginald into an extended trot, the horse's strides long and powerful, covering ground with remarkable efficiency. Then, with a subtle shift of the reins, he brought Reginald down into a collected walk, showcasing the animal's ability to transition seamlessly between gaits. Every movement was deliberate, every step calculated, leaving no doubt about the depth of the bond between rider and horse. The spectators were spellbound. Cameras clicked furiously, but many people simply stood still, unwilling to miss a single moment of the performance unfolding before them. Parents lifted their children onto shoulders for a better view, while friends nudged each other excitedly, pointing out details they didn't want to forget. Even those who had initially been distracted by their phones now held them aside, choosing instead to soak in the magic of the moment. It was clear that something special was happening, something that transcended the usual pomp and pageantry of the changing of the guard. What made this segment truly remarkable was how Whittaker used it not just to entertain, but also to educate. As Reginald performed each maneuver, Whittaker subtly highlighted the importance of discipline and teamwork. When the horse responded instantly to a quiet command or a light touch, it served as a reminder of the respect and communication required to build such a partnership. For many in the audience, this added layer of meaning elevated the experience beyond mere spectacle. They weren't just watching a soldier ride a horse. They were witnessing the culmination of years of dedication, patience, and mutual trust. Even the young man who had caused the earlier disruption seemed captivated. Standing quietly near the barrier, he watched intently, his earlier bravado replaced by genuine awe. Perhaps he finally understood the weight of his actions, or maybe he was simply marveling at the beauty of what he was seeing. Either way, his demeanor reflected the change in the crowd's overall mood, from chaotic curiosity to respectful admiration. As the final moments of the ceremony approached, Whittaker brought Reginald back to the forefront of the procession. Together, they led the formation past the cheering crowd, their synchronized movements drawing sustained applause. People clapped rhythmically, some even breaking into spontaneous chants of "Bravo" or "Well done." Children waved enthusiastically, their faces beaming with delight. It was a scene unlike any other, a blend of tradition, skill, and human connection that left everyone present feeling uplifted. For Whittaker, this was the pinnacle of his role as a member of the King's Guard. It wasn't just about performing duties or maintaining order. It was about creating moments that resonated deeply with others. By turning a potential mishap into a triumph, he had reminded the crowd of the values that defined these ceremonies: discipline, respect, and adaptability. And as he rode past the barriers one last time, offering a slight nod of acknowledgement, he knew he had succeeded. The applause followed him all the way to the end of the parade route, a testament to the impact he had made. Tourists lingered long after the ceremony concluded, reluctant to leave the spot where they had witnessed something extraordinary. Some snapped photos of the empty street, as if trying to capture the lingering energy of the event. Others shared stories with strangers, recounting the highlights of what they had seen. In that moment, the Horse Guards Parade became more than just a tourist attraction. It became a memory etched into the hearts of everyone who attended. And at the center of it all was, as the final notes of the band faded and the ceremonial procession drew to a close, Captain James Whittaker dismounted from Reginald with the same precision and grace that had defined his performance throughout the day. The applause from the crowd still lingered in the air, a warm echo of appreciation that followed him as he led the horse back toward the stables. Though outwardly composed, Whittaker couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction and relief as the weight of the day's events began to settle. Once inside the quiet confines of the stable, Whittaker allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He removed Reginald's bridle and saddle with practiced hands, his movements slow and deliberate as he checked the horse for any signs of stress or discomfort. Thankfully, Reginald seemed unfazed by the earlier disruption, his steady breathing and relaxed posture a testament to both his temperament and Whittaker's calming influence. As Whittaker ran a brush over the stallion's gleaming coat, he found himself replaying the day's moments in his mind. The startled reaction, the quick thinking, and ultimately, the crowd's overwhelming response. It wasn't often that a single incident stood out so vividly during these ceremonies. Most days passed in a blur of routine, each one blending seamlessly into the next. But today had been different. Today, Whittaker had faced an unexpected challenge head-on, relying not just on his training, but also on his instincts to turn a potentially dangerous situation into something meaningful. He thought about the young man who had caused the disturbance, wondering if the experience might leave a lasting impression on him. Would he think twice before stepping too close to a horse again? Would he share the story with friends and family, perhaps even passing along the lesson he'd learned about respect and responsibility? Whittaker also reflected on the reactions of the crowd. At first, they had been unpredictable, excited, but occasionally reckless in their enthusiasm. Yet, when given the chance to truly engage with the ceremony, they had responded with admiration. And the story of Captain James Whittaker's exceptional horsemanship at the Horse Guards Parade spread quickly, becoming a tale that would be retold for years to come. Tourists who had witnessed the event eagerly recounted it to friends and family back home, their voices brimming with excitement as they described how the Guard had turned a moment of chaos into one of triumph. Social media platforms lit up with photos and videos of Reginald and Whittaker, capturing the grace and composure that had left such a lasting impression. For many, it was more than just a memory. It was a lesson in discipline, respect, and the power of human connection. Word of Whittaker's actions reached beyond the tourists, making its way to colleagues, superiors, and even members of the public who hadn't been present that day. The senior officers of the King's Guard held a brief meeting to commend his handling of the situation, praising not only his technical skill, but also his ability to de-escalate tension without losing the dignity of the ceremony. "What you did out there wasn't just about controlling a horse," one officer remarked during the discussion. "You reminded everyone, both the crowd and us, why we do what we do. You showed them the heart behind the tradition." Whittaker accepted the praise modestly, deflecting much of the attention onto Reginald. "He's the real star," he said with a wry smile. Without him, none of it would have been possible. Still, he couldn't deny the sense of pride that swelled within him. It wasn't every day that someone got to transform a potential mishap into a defining moment, not just for themselves, but for an entire audience. He knew that stories like this were rare, moments when duty intersected with humanity in a way that resonated deeply with others. For the tourists who had been there, the experience became a cherished memory, a highlight of their trip to London. Many returned to Horse Guards Parade on subsequent visits, hoping to catch another glimpse of the iconic ceremony. Some even sought out Whittaker specifically, though they rarely found him. Guardsmen rotated duties frequently, and Whittaker himself preferred to stay out of the spotlight. Yet, whenever visitors asked about the guard with the incredible horse, stewards and fellow soldiers were quick to share the story, ensuring that Whittaker's legacy lived on. In the weeks that followed, Whittaker reflected on the broader impact of that day. While he had always taken pride in his role as a member of the King's Guard, the incident reinforced his belief in the importance of adaptability and empathy. Traditions like the changing of the guard weren't static relics of the past. They were living experiences shaped by the interactions between those who upheld them and those who witnessed them. Every crowd was different, bringing its own energy, curiosity, and challenges. And while some days tested patience more than others, Each one offered an opportunity to inspire and educate. Reginald, too, seemed to carry a bit of extra swagger in the days after the parade. Whether it was coincidence or something deeper, the stallion appeared even more responsive and eager during training sessions, as if he understood the significance of what they had accomplished together. Whitaker often joked that Reginald thought he was famous now, pointing out how the horse seemed to hold his head higher whenever they passed admirers. But beneath the humor lay a profound truth. The bond between rider and horse had grown stronger through shared adversity. As time went on, Whitaker continued to perform his duties with the same dedication and professionalism that had earned him acclaim. Each ceremony brought new faces, new challenges, and new opportunities to connect with people from around the world. Yet, no matter how busy life became, he never forgot the lessons of that day. The importance of staying calm under pressure, of turning disruptions into teachable moments, and of fostering mutual respect between traditions and the modern world. Ultimately, the story of Captain James Whitaker and Reginald became more than just a personal triumph. It became a symbol of the enduring power of tradition. In a fast-paced, ever-changing world, ceremonies like the changing of the guard served as anchors, reminding people of where they came from and what they valued most. And thanks to Whitaker's poise and leadership, countless individuals walked away with a deeper appreciation for the effort, skill, and heart that went into preserving these rituals. Years later, when Whitaker eventually retired from service, he often looked back on that sunny afternoon at Horse Guards Parade as one of the proudest moments of his career. Not because it brought him recognition, but because it allowed him to make a difference, to remind people that traditions weren't just about history. They were about humanity. And as long as there were individuals willing to uphold them with grace and